talk about a concept known as calorie cycling. So that's kind of the day, calorie cycling. So, so think about it. When we first start dieting, we're trying to lose fat. If you could lose as much fat as you did in that first week, everything would be great, right? Everything would be phenomenal. You know, unfortunately, what do? We plateau, right? You know, we hit a plateau, and I think that's a big problem. And so how do you overcome the plateau? Well, basically, a lot of times when people talk about a plateau, it's because they basically, oh, I plateau, so what I'm doing, I'm going to lower my calories more. Okay, I plateau, I'm going to lower my calories more. Okay, I plateau, I'm going to add more cardio. And eventually what happens? Your back's against the wall, right? Your metabolism's completely, down the garbage disposal, and you've adapted. Your body has adapted so thoroughly that you can gain fat on 1,200 calories. How many times? Who's that happened to? Right? Is that happened to anyone listening to this? You know what I mean? It's happened to us all, I would say, at some point, relatively speaking. So, by the way, if you're listening to this, make sure you hit the share button, because this is important information I'm going to give you guys. Very important information. It's going to keep your metabolism elevated, and you're going to want to let your friends know about this. So basically, how do we counter that? Well, one of the things to understand is that calorie deficits will adapt by slowing our metabolisms, and I think everyone knows that. But you need a calorie deficit. Well, you want a calorie deficit to sort of optimize fat loss. Can you lose fat without a calorie deficit? Sure, but to optimize fat loss, you're going to want that. Okay, so there's a concept known as calorie cycling. And calorie cycling essentially is where you go through periods where you have deficits, and then periods where you have normal calories, and maybe even periods where you have a little bit more than maintenance. So let's say that normally, you know the equation. All right, I'm going to basically have a 500 calorie deficit, and I'm just going to maintain it for the whole week, right? Well, the problem with that is that after a few weeks, or even after 2 weeks, your body will have adapted to that deficit. So calorie cycling will essentially have days during the week where you'll up your calories. Now, the first study to study this was by a researcher. His name was Davuti, and Davuti had individuals. He had two groups. One group basically had a calorie deficit, like 500 calorie deficit for 10 days. And then for 3 days, they were able to eat what they wanted. Now, it turned out they just ate maintenance calories on those days. And then they went back to the calorie deficit for 10 days. And then they upped their calories again. So that's kind of so that's what they did. They compared the two groups. The group that he called it calorie shifting. The group that calorie shifted basically lost far more fat than the group that just had a calorie deficit every day. That's even though the people at a calorie deficit per day on paper should have had a greater total calorie deficit. The people who calorie shifted actually lost more fat. So I think that's really super important, okay? So basically, one way you can do it is 10 days calorie deficit, 3 days up. But you know what? I think that there are different ways to calorie cycle. We can use a lot of different methods. So one is basically you could go, I'm going to diet. I'll diet Monday, Tuesday. I'll do Monday through Friday, and on the weekends I'll eat normal. Maybe one day slightly above maintenance. Okay. The other thing you can do that has worked is you could do like a low calorie day, a moderate calorie day, and a maintenance day. Then back to a high calorie deficit, moderate calorie deficit, high calorie deficit. So like, for example, your low calorie day could be an 800 calorie deficit. Your moderate calorie deficit could be a 400 calorie deficit. Then you can go back to maintenance. Or you go 2 very low days, 1 moderate day, 1 maintenance day. Then back down to 1 low day, 1 moderate day, 1 maintenance day. Okay? And maybe once a week, maybe you have your calories 200 to 300 calories above maintenance, okay? So this is calorie cycling, and we know that it works very well. Now, Davuti went and looked at these people's metabolisms, and it turned out that the people's the people who calorie shifted maintained their metabolism, whereas the people who didn't calorie shift, their metabolism slowed. So there's research showing that this maintains metabolism. So this is your basic general calorie cycling strategy. The question is, are there other ways that you can calorie shift that are more extreme? Well, and can you kind of can you intermittently restrict? Okay, the answer is yes. Now here's the thing. I don't know about you, so but dieting sucks. It's not fun. Okay, so basically you're like, oh man, I only have 1,800 calories to work with. So your meals are smaller, and all day you're suffering, right? God, this meal was so much hungrier than I could have been. And then you're hungry. And then at night, you're like, man, I got to have a small meal at night. Now I'm going to go to bed hungry. And mentally, it's taxing, right? Now, there's a concept. It's called self-control strength. And basically, you want to think of your self-control as almost like, it's like a tank, a gas tank. So when you wake up at the beginning of the day, your gas tank is full. So you wake up motivated. Today's going to be a great day, etc., etc. But then you get to nighttime, and you're like, all you can think about is food. And you have that small meal, and it's like, maybe I'll just go and eat this extra thing. And then you're like, oh, what the hell? I'm just going to go ahead and eat whatever's in the freezer, the ice cream, okay? Studies literally show self-control strength it's real, okay? So I'll give you another example of like self-control strength. Let's say that I'm with Andy, and someone comes in and pisses Andy off, right? Or so say like he's scheduled to do his training session. He's going to go do legs at 8 in the morning. And all of a sudden someone comes in and distracts him from doing legs for like an hour. And that's going to drain his self-control strength. So then if I put like a brownie in front of him, he'll actually be more prone to eat that than if his self-control strength wasn't drained. So it's important to understand that by the end of the day it happens. So is there a way that we can counter that? One way is intermittent restriction, which is really intermittent fasting. So basically there's like, say that instead of spreading your meals out throughout the day, maybe you limit your meals to like a 6-hour feeding period or an 8-hour feeding period. And so you're only you're restricting hard. It sucks for a portion of the day, but then the rest of the day you're eating normal. So it's kind of a calorie cycling perspective. Or calorie shifting, but it's just shifting your calories to a certain part of the day. And studies do show that works. The other extreme form of calorie cycling is every other day dieting. So basically it's like I go maintenance today, and then the next day I restrict hard. Okay? The studies that you see do extreme. And basically what they do is like I have normal calories today or slightly above, and the next day I literally only eat 25% of my calories. So like if my maintenance calories are 2,000, the next day I eat 500. And then I go back to maintenance, and the next day I eat 500. And then I go back to maintenance, and the next day I go to 500. Studies have shown this works actually really well. It's hard. Maybe you take a less extreme form of it, where it's like, normally you have a 500 calorie deficit. Well, maybe you go maintenance, next day 1,000 calorie deficit. Maintenance, next day 1,000 calorie deficit. So now you're only dieting every other day. It's hard, but you're only dieting every other day. And studies show that at the beginning, you're really hungry when you do that. But after a few weeks, you're no longer hungry on those super low calorie days. So those are and studies bear out that that's actually can be very, very beneficial. So you can actually see a lot of fat loss doing that. So that's some things those are some techniques. People lose a lot of fat and they sustain muscle, because on those super low calorie days, what ends up happening is when your calories are that low, your ketones raise up, and it actually seems to trigger a satiety response. So you're not thinking about food on those very low calorie days. So for example, it's the strangest, weirdest thing. But if I have a 500 calorie deficit, I might be more hungry that day than if I adapted to a 1,200 calorie deficit. Now I know you're thinking, that sounds really weird, but it's actually true. There's meta-analyses, which are basically review papers where they take tons of studies and put them together. And the reason is when I get my calories super low, my ketones raise up really high, and that creates like, and my fatty acids get really high, and that creates a satiating effect. So it actually may be more easier to diet really hard, like a 1,000 to a 1,200 calorie deficit every other day, than a small deficit every day. And in the first 2 weeks, you might be super hungry, but after that, is every other day, your energy is going to be super high, your ketones are going to be super high, and you'll feel great about yourself. So that's my thing. So again, calorie cycling, to summarize, calorie cycling seems to be very beneficial. You never want to just diet and go, I'm going to have a 500 calorie deficit, and when I plateau, I'm just going to lower my calories more. No, what you want to do is calorie cycle. The original calorie shifting was 10 days a deficit, 3 days where you eat normal. Another way to do it, I explained, was basically have a low calorie day, a moderate calorie day, a maintenance day, repeat. Another way to do it is diet Monday through Friday, eat normal on the weekends. Another way I talked about doing it is every other day dieting. Eat normal or slightly above maintenance, like maybe 200 calories above maintenance every other day. And then on the opposite days, have maybe as high as 1,000 to 1,500 calorie deficit. That seems extreme, but but the point is you're dieting every other day. Extreme dieting every other day. But it's mainly like you might diet for 1,000 calorie deficit to studies have shown up to a 1,500 calorie deficit, where basically like they're only eating 25% of their calories. So based on those every other days, you're eating 25 to 50% of your calories, as opposed to eating 75% of your calories every day. Studies show that you basically lose a lot more fat doing that, and your metabolism stays better. Okay, so that's it. You guys, anything else that I should add to that?
Calorie cycling? No.
Okay, guys. So guess what? Now, guess what we're doing now? We are now doing Q&As.
Open floor.
Open floor. Open floor. This is for you guys. Also, make sure you share this. Share this with your friends. Spread the love.
Calorie cycling and ketogenic dieting.
Ashley Hawley says, do you believe that calorie cycling is effective or can maximize fat loss in the context of ketogenic dieting as long as you consistently have 70 to 75% of your calories coming from fat? Actually, it turns out that ketogenic dieting actually makes calorie cycling a lot easier. And I would recommend, particularly when you're doing like the time restricted, like you're only eating 8 hours a day, ketogenic dieting works exceptionally well there because it's so satiating. And when you're in the dieting component, restricting part, your ketones are so high you're not hungry. It also works really well with every other day, low calorie days, like where you're restricting like down to, you're restricting 50 to 75% of your calories every other day. It works remarkably well.
Keto and powerlifting.
Keto and powerlifting is actually works really well because with powerlifting, you're primarily using like ATP PC. We've also found that we actually did a study that's in press in Journal of Strength Conditioning Research, where we found people who gained just as much strength on bench, squat, and deadlift on keto as compared to those guys who are on carbs. So I think it works well, but also for your division, you'll likely be able to make weight in your division easier without having to cut weight so drastically.
How do you bulk and cut at the same time?
Well, that might go to a calorie cycling. How do you bulk and cut at the same time? This is a very advanced technique. But if you're calorie cycling on a diet, maybe you calorie cycle for 2 weeks. You've lost fat, okay? And now your metabolism's still maintained because you calorie cycled. Now you do the opposite. You bulk, okay? But basically you have like a maintenance day, a slightly elevated day, and then a high day. And then maybe on the 4th day you go down to a slight calorie deficit. But for 2 weeks, essentially, you're now calorie cycling. Basically you're now calorie cycling, but you're doing it the opposite way, going up. So now you maintain insulin sensitivity during that time on the bulk, but then you go back to cutting for 2 weeks. But you shifted slightly so that you maybe gained at the end of those 4 weeks, maybe like 2 pounds. So you're gaining a half a pound equivalent. Maybe you gain 4 pounds, depends on how extreme it is. But the goal is you should be dropping fat during those cutting phases, and by the end of the 4 weeks, you're just pure, lean, raw mass.
Will I lose muscle on a keto diet if my protein is below my actual lean body mass?
So will I lose muscle in keto dieting if my protein is below your lean mass? Keto dieting is unique in that ketones themselves may be anabolic and they're anti-catabolic. So it depends on how much lower they are than your lean body mass, okay? So I would say you run the risk of yes, that being the case, but if it's slightly below your lean mass, probably not. If it's a lot below your lean mass, yes.
When doing calorie cycling, what does it matter as far as protein or carbohydrate ratios?
So when you're calorie cycling, say you're a carb guy, my recommendation is cycling the carbs, but not changing, especially the protein on your low calorie days you don't want to lower. So you're basically going to want to cycle the carbs. I think, yeah.
Keto dieting and endurance athletes.
Keto dieting and endurance athletes may be prescriptive. Think about it. When you're running or you're going long distance cycling, you want to think about that from this perspective. Imagine that you are, like one of those big fuel tankers, and essentially you run on diesel fuel, but you're carrying around fuel. You're carrying around normal unleaded fuel in the huge tanker. Now imagine you're running on diesel fuel and you run out of fuel. How much fuel do you have in that huge tank? A ton, right? That's kind of what hitting the wall's like, okay? You now have a much bigger tank, but you can't tap into it. Why? You're not adapted to use unleaded. Well, that's fat. When you're a runner and you hit the wall, you basically can't tap into the unleaded fuel. That's your body fat. If you're keto adapted, you literally have, even if you're lean, 50, 60,000 calories worth of fuel you can't tap into. Your muscle carbohydrate stores are only like 1,600 calories in all of your muscles, including your upper body. So if your lower body is probably like 1,200, 1,100. How you can run out of that like that. Your liver is only like 400 calories. You can run out of that like that. So bottom line is that when you're keto adapted, so what do you no longer need goos. You don't need a bunch of, high calorie sugary drinks. You can run off your fat. And so I think for convenience sake, it's very beneficial.
Are exogenous ketones only beneficial on a ketogenic diet?
Exogenous ketones are beneficial whether you're on a ketogenic diet or on a carbohydrate diet.
For cycling, eat 10 low calorie days and normal for 3 days. For those 3 days, do you mean cheat days?
Okay, so you don't want, in the study they didn't do like, I'm going to go to Cheesecake Factory and binge and you're eating like 4,000 calories. No, you're either maintenance, and I wouldn't go above 500 calories above maintenance on those days.
What about high calorie cheat meals and or days where people are basically told to binge eat? What is the benefit of those?
Okay, I don't think there's a benefit to binge eating ever. I think that's destructive. So I think and in fact, it's classified as an eating disorder when you're binging, right? So, and then you feel horrible the next day and you become insulin resistant. I think it's okay to have a cheat meal, but even then, say you're I'm gonna have a day where I'm gonna eat I want a cheat meal, I have to have it. I'd intermittent fast on those days and have that cheat meal and still fit it within 500 calories of your maintenance. Any good books on keto? Yeah, we're actually going to release a book coming out real soon, the Ketogenic Bible. So when calculating macros, do 1 pound per body weight or lean weight? I base it on body weight. I think just based on a body weight. I don't think you need to get that technical.
This is kind of a good. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say this doesn't really apply, but I have one arm bigger than the other. Is there a possibility of improving essentially hypertrophy in one arm to make them similar?
Yes. What you want to do probably, number one, it could be that you might just need to focus. You may have a better mind-muscle connection in one arm because you're dominant in that arm. So you may need to just focus more. In other words, maybe you don't even need more volume. Maybe for the next month, you just make sure that your mind-muscle connection's focused on that arm better. I think is a good technique. If you really want to bring it up fast, maybe add in one more set to that arm at the end of the workout. And I think don't go too overboard. You don't want to create strength imbalances, but one is just that, Okay. Someone says, I'm coming in Tampa in April. Can I please come and meet you guys? Dream come true. Absolutely. Yeah, come and meet us. Check out our website, theaspi.com. You can contact us there. But you know what? If that's a dream come true, then we're going to make your dream come true. Absolutely. Okay. Guys, this is a community here.
Google environment.
Yeah, it's a Google environment, man. We love you guys. If you're a beginner lifter, should you do long muscle building phase with short periods of dieting? It depends. If you're endomorphic, like I'm like ectomorphic. I feel. I gain fat easy, but it's hard for me to gain muscle. I'm not going to go for really long periods of trying to bulk because I'm gonna gain a ton of fat during that bulk phase. I'll never be able to make up for it. So if you're a beginner and a hard gainer, yes, focus a long period on that.
When are you going to do a muscle PhD on shoulders?
You took it.
Oh, that's the next. Oh, wow, that's great. Actually, we start next week our next Muscle PhD Academy for the next 3 weeks, and within those 3 weeks, we're going to have a shoulder one. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're going to do that, and it'll likely be broken into 2 phases. So the next 3 weeks, one of those weeks will be shoulders, and then the following Muscle PhD Academy will also have the follow-up parts of that.
Maybe insulin sensitivity, or go ahead and read that one.
So, is it Man Mizan says, to test if you're carb sensitive, you would eat a meal with carbs, and if you feel tired later on, would mean you're carb sensitive. I feel tired after eating keto meal. No, I think you really want to look at like blood glucose levels. Like if you eat a carb meal and 90 minutes later your blood glucose is still above 120 milligrams per deciliter, you're probably not too insulin sensitive. And so you might want to consider either having lower glycemic carbohydrates or higher fiber carbs, or just selecting a more lower carbohydrate diet. Joey, what's up, man? All right. So it's 60% protein, 20-20. 60% protein, 20% fat, 20% carbohydrate, too much protein. When does gluconeogenesis become risky for fat loss? I think 60% protein is kind of high. You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong, I've tried that. And I think cycling your here's the thing. If you're doing 60% protein, you'll adapt and gluconeogenesis will be super high. Okay? So, if you do that, only do it for short periods of time, like 1 to 2 weeks or 1 to 2 days a week. Then it may be helpful for fat loss. What are your thoughts on apple cider vinegar and losing fat? I think it works. Just have like 2 or 3 tablespoons. There's actually research we posted on a previous Muscle PhD Academy. It showed it helped with fat loss. So do it. Okay.
It's Ray.
Oh, it's Ray.
What's up, Ray?
What's up, Ray?
Ray says he always watches. He tells the truth.
Yeah, Ray does tell the truth. Thoughts on adjusting carbs in the off season on rest days and lower intensity? Yeah, that's Sam. So basically, yes, I think that on your lower work days, carbohydrates should be lower. Absolutely.
Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by work?
So good point. So basically, like if I have a high volume metabolic day where I'm doing training and high intensity interval training that day, I might be able to use more carbs. If I'm doing a heavy day, I'm doing like 5x5, my volume's not that high. My total work's not that high. My total sets aren't that high. My total reps aren't that high. Why would I have a high carb up day that day? Plus, I'm lifting heavy. I cause a lot of muscle damage, which makes me more insulin resistant that day. So higher carb days should be on your more metabolic days. Let's see. Are you going to do Project Shred soon? It's interesting actually. We're talking with bodybuilding.com, and we're going to start doing stuff with them, more YouTube work with them, more articles with them. So I'm going to talk. I'll tell you what. This is Christian. I'll tell you what. We'll talk to bodybuilding.com about doing a Project Shred. I think also we're going to be launching the Muscle PhD website. In
the next 4 weeks.
In the next 4 weeks.
Yep.
maybe we'll just launch Project Shred on there, right?
Do you ever check your ketones?
I actually just checked my ketones, like, yeah, I just checked
Coincidence.
them. Coincidence, I just checked them about an hour and a half ago. I was actually pissed off, they're only 0.3.
At least, hey, he's transparent, he's honest.
I am honest, but I think it's because I'm a high ketone utilizer.
All right, let's do
I like
That's
I
what
like
it
your out
is.
on that.
2 more questions.
Okay,
Good. Do you recommend a multivitamin supplement?
yes, and B vitamins. Aboy says, what should I do? You should share the love. Share this with everybody. Spread the love.
Okay.
And train hard.
3 questions. How many times how many times should I train my calves?
I'll be honest with you. Like, so the one body part I have, yeah, the one body parts I have that respond to training are like my calves and my lower body. Now, to be honest, like the best results I ever got was when I trained my calves every single day. Now, there's data to support that too. So I'm not going bro on you guys. There's data to support that high frequency training can work for muscle growth. But like training your calves, if they don't grow, train them every single day. I'm going to give you one final tip on that, okay? Remember, you have a lot of muscles in your calves. You have that, think about the thick calf muscle. It's called the gastrocnemius. Then you got that like muscle that's kind of like, you know, a V coming out of the calves, that nice, that V look. That's called the soleus, all right? Then you got the front of the calves, right? And that's the tibialis anterior. So again, you got the front calves, you got the thick calf muscle, and then the V, and you have other ones too. But in short, standing calf raise is going to hit that thick calf, okay? Seated calf raise unloads. Basically, the thick calf's not in a good enough position to train very well. So seated calf raises is going to hit that V, and then basically anterior, what I do is I lay back on the bench and I do like reverse calf raises on the leg curl machine, and that will build the front of the calves. So your calves look huge from the front, ties into the quads.
Does that apply to any body part? Training it every day if it's lacking?
Yeah, I think it does. And like any body part, you want to make sure you don't train it the same way every day. So what I recommend for the calves is train the anterior calves, the front of the calves every other day, and then train the back of the calves every other day. You know, or if you're really advanced, do front calves day 1, then do standing calf movements day 2, day 3 do seated calf movements, day 4 maybe take off, and then 3 repeat the split. Your calves will grow big time.